Alright family, come a little closer for this one, because what I'm about to tell you still doesn't feel real, even when I say it out loud. Picture this. White roses everywhere. Soft music floating through a packed church. My baby sister standing at the altar, hands shaking, veil glowing under stained glass. Everyone smiling, phones ready, hearts full. And then the pastor clears his throat and says words that slice through that room like a blade. You can't marry him. The music stopped. The room froze. And before anyone could breathe, he said, I need to read something. Just one text. The perfect image can be one of the most dangerous disguises a person can wear, because it disarms everyone around them before anyone thinks to ask real questions. When someone looks right, sounds right, and knows exactly how to play the role they're expected to play, people stop paying attention to their instincts. They stop noticing the small pauses, the little inconsistencies, the things that don't quite line up. That's what makes deception so powerful when it's wrapped in charm and good manners. It doesn't announce itself as a threat. It shows up smiling, offering help, quoting the right verses, and saying all the things that make people feel safe. Daniel didn't look like a villain. He didn't act like one either. He looked like stability. He sounded like commitment. He knew how to show up in a way that earned trust without ever having to demand it. That's what made him dangerous. When someone appears dependable, people assume honesty comes with it. They assume integrity is part of the package. And once that assumption is made, the mind starts protecting the illusion instead of questioning it. Any red flag becomes probably nothing. Any doubt becomes, I'm just overthinking. That's how lies survive for so long without resistance. A polished image creates credibility before proof is ever required. It's a shortcut to trust, and manipulators know exactly how to use it. They understand that people want to believe in goodness, especially when it comes dressed in familiarity and faith. They know that once they've been accepted by the family, the church, the community, they gain insulation. Even if something feels off, no one wants to be the one to disrupt the picture. No one wants to be the person who questions the man everyone else already approves of. So silence becomes easier than curiosity. What makes this kind of deception especially painful is that it doesn't just fool strangers. It fools the people closest to the situation. Family members, friends, even spiritual leaders can be pulled into the performance if it's consistent enough. And consistency is key. A double life only works when the mask never slips in public. That requires discipline, planning, and a lack of conscience that allows someone to lie without flinching. The more effort someone puts into maintaining the image, the more convincing it becomes, and the harder it is for others to imagine that anything darker could exist beneath it. People often assume that lies are obvious in hindsight, but that's rarely true when you're living inside them. From the inside, everything feels normal. The relationship progresses, milestones are met, plans are made. The future looks solid because it's been carefully staged to look that way. And when doubts do surface, they are quickly smoothed over by reassurance and familiarity. After all, this is someone who's been welcomed into the home, trusted in sacred spaces, praised by others. Surely someone like that wouldn't be capable of such a betrayal. That belief becomes the lie's strongest ally. The danger of a perfect image is that it teaches people to trust appearances more than patterns. Real character reveals itself over time, in consistency across private and public moments, in accountability when no one is watching. But image focuses on performance. It prioritizes how things look rather than how they are. And when someone is committed to looking good instead of being honest, they will always choose preservation over truth. They'll protect the mask even if it costs someone else their dignity, their peace, or their future. This is why deception rooted in image is so devastating when it's finally exposed. It doesn't just break a relationship. It shatters trust in perception itself. People start replaying moments, questioning memories, wondering how much of what they experienced was real. The betrayal feels deeper, because it wasn't just emotional, it was psychological. The victim wasn't simply lied to. They were convinced to doubt their own instincts, to trust someone who had been rehearsing a role the entire time. And yet, exposure also reveals something important. It shows that no image, no matter how polished, can withstand truth forever. Lies depend on silence, separation, and control. The moment information crosses boundaries, the illusion starts to crack. One question, one document, one message is often all it takes to unravel years of deception. That's why people who live double lives are always afraid of overlap. They fear the moment when worlds collide, because that collision exposes who they really are. Understanding this doesn't mean becoming suspicious of everyone. It means learning to value substance over presentation. It means listening when something feels off, even if everything looks perfect on the surface. It means recognizing that trust should be built slowly, reinforced by actions that align over time, not fast-tracked by charm or approval from others. Because the truth is, the most convincing masks are worn by people who know exactly how to blend in, and the strongest protection against that kind of deception is not cynicism, but awareness that image alone is never proof of integrity. Truth has a way of arriving without asking permission, and it almost never shows up at a convenient time. It doesn't check calendars, consider feelings, or wait for moments that feel safe. It appears when it's ready, often right in the middle of celebrations, plans, and dreams that people are already emotionally invested in. That's what makes it feel so brutal when it interrupts a lie. But that interruption is also what makes it powerful. Lies rely on momentum. They need time to keep rolling forward without resistance. Truth stops that motion cold. When a lie has been carefully constructed over months or years, the person living inside it starts to believe that timing is on their side. They assume that if nothing has surfaced yet, nothing ever will. Every milestone reached without exposure feels like confirmation that they are in the clear. Engagements, promotions, public praise, and future plans all become layers of protection. The more public the lie becomes, the harder it feels for truth to break through. And yet, that's often when it chooses to speak. The moment truth interrupts is rarely gentle. It doesn't ease its way in with soft explanations or private warnings. It disrupts. It pauses the music. It stops the ceremony. It forces attention. And while that can feel humiliating or shocking for everyone involved, it also prevents something worse from happening quietly later. A public interruption may feel cruel in the moment, but a private lifetime built on deception would have been far more devastating. People often ask why truth couldn't have come sooner or later, somewhere less exposed. But the timing of truth is rarely about comfort. It's about impact. When a lie reaches a critical point, when it's about to lock someone into a future they didn't consent to, truth steps in like an emergency brake. It doesn't care how dramatic the stop is. It only cares that the damage doesn't continue unchecked. That's why it often shows up right before vows are spoken, contracts are signed, or irreversible choices are made. There's also something about public truth that strips lies of their power immediately. In private, a liar can negotiate, manipulate, gaslight, and minimize. They can cry, promise change, or twist the narrative. But when truth enters a shared space, the performance collapses. There's no time to rewrite the story. No room to control reactions. The truth stands on its own, witnessed and validated by others, and the liar loses the ability to isolate their victim. For the person on the receiving end, that moment can feel like the ground disappearing beneath their feet. Shock, embarrassment, grief, and confusion all hit at once. There's no gradual adjustment period. No chance to process quietly. But there is clarity. As painful as it is, truth eliminates uncertainty in an instant. It answers questions that might have otherwise taken years to uncover. It reveals intentions, patterns, and realities that were deliberately hidden. And once that clarity arrives, there's no going back to the illusion. It's important to recognize that truth doesn't humiliate people. Lies do. Truth simply exposes what was already happening behind the scenes. The discomfort comes from realizing how close the lie came to succeeding. That's why the interruption feels so intense. It highlights the narrow escape. It forces a confrontation with what almost happened, and that realization can be overwhelming. But it also creates an opportunity for a different outcome, one rooted in honesty rather than deception. Many people mistake the pain of exposure for proof that truth did harm. In reality, truth prevented harm from becoming permanent. It stopped a life from being built on false consent. It stopped years of confusion, betrayal, and self-doubt from unfolding in private. It compressed pain into a moment instead of spreading it across a lifetime. That compression hurts, but it heals faster than slow, ongoing betrayal ever could. There's also a quiet justice in the way truth chooses its timing. It often arrives at moments of maximum visibility, not to punish, but to protect. It ensures that the lie cannot be reframed later, as a misunderstanding, or a mutual mistake. It creates a clear line between reality and fiction. And once that line is drawn, everyone involved is forced to reckon with it. Over time, the memory of that interruption shifts. What once felt like devastation begins to look like rescue. The embarrassment fades, but the gratitude remains. The person who was spared realizes that the interruption saved them from investing more time, love, and trust into something that was never real. They begin to see that truth didn't ruin their life. It rerouted it. Truth doesn't whisper when lies are shouting. It speaks loudly enough to be heard, even if that means disrupting something that looked beautiful on the surface. And while the moment it arrives can feel unbearable, it often marks the exact point where a life quietly turns away from disaster and toward freedom. Betrayal doesn't arrive gently. It crashes into a person's sense of safety and rearranges everything they thought they knew. But what makes betrayal especially devastating isn't just the broken trust. It's the moment of exposure that follows. When a lie is revealed, the pain isn't limited to the relationship itself. It becomes public, visible, undeniable. And that exposure can feel more wounding than the betrayal, because it strips away privacy along with illusion. It leaves a person standing in the open, processing heartbreak while others are watching. There is a unique kind of shame that comes with being betrayed in front of others. Even though the wrongdoing isn't yours, it can feel like it is. The mind starts asking questions that shouldn't even exist. How did I miss this? What do they think of me? Do they see me as foolish? Betrayal convinces people to turn blame inward, even when the truth points outward. Exposure intensifies that impulse, because now the pain feels performative, as if the world is witnessing something deeply personal that should have stayed private. What people often don't realize is that exposure doesn't create humiliation. It reveals it. The humiliation was already present, embedded in the lie itself. Every secret message, every double life, every false promise was an act of disrespect happening long before anyone else knew. Exposure simply removes the curtain. It brings the harm into the light where it can no longer operate unchecked. But in the moment, that distinction is hard to feel. All the betrayed person knows is that they are hurting and that others can see it. And yet, exposure is also where the power shifts. Betrayal thrives in isolation. Lies gain strength when they are shared with only one person, controlled, managed, and revised as needed. The moment exposure happens, the betrayer loses that control. They can no longer dictate what is known or how it is interpreted. The narrative no longer belongs to them. That loss of control is why exposure feels so destabilizing for the person who lied and so confusing for the person who trusted. In that instant, the betrayed person often feels smaller, but in reality, they are being freed from a story that was never fully theirs. Exposure ends the gaslighting. It confirms that the confusion, the unease, the unanswered questions weren't imagined. It validates instincts that were ignored or dismissed. Even when the truth is painful, it provides solid ground after a long period of emotional uncertainty. That grounding is the beginning of reclaiming power. There is also a reckoning that happens internally. Once the truth is exposed, the betrayed person no longer has to perform belief. They no longer have to protect someone else's secrets or maintain appearances. The emotional labor of pretending everything is fine disappears. That relief can feel strange at first, because it arrives alongside grief. But over time, it becomes clear that carrying the truth is lighter than carrying a lie. Exposure forces a separation between identity and experience. It becomes possible to say this happened to me, not this is who I am. That distinction is critical. Without it, betrayal can reshape self-worth and linger as a personal failure. With it, the pain becomes something to process rather than something to internalize. Exposure helps draw that line, especially when others witness the truth and recognize it for what it is. It's also worth noting that exposure creates accountability, in a way private discovery often doesn't. When betrayal is revealed publicly, it can't be minimized or reframed as a misunderstanding. It exists in full view, making denial harder and consequences more likely. That accountability doesn't erase the hurt, but it restores balance. It affirms that actions have weight, and that deception carries costs beyond emotional damage. Over time, many people come to see exposure as the moment their healing truly began. Not because it was easy or kind, but because it ended uncertainty. It answered questions that might have lingered for years. It provided a clear break from the past instead of a slow unraveling. The shock was sharp, but it was brief compared to the long ache of ongoing deception. Betrayal wounds deeply, but exposure breaks its hold. It interrupts the cycle of lies and returns agency to the person who was deceived. While the initial experience may feel like standing under a spotlight, that light eventually becomes a guide rather than a threat. It shows the way out of confusion and into clarity, allowing dignity to be rebuilt on truth instead of illusion. There is a quiet strength in choosing restraint when emotion would be easier. In moments of betrayal, the world often expects chaos, confrontation, and visible collapse. People assume that pain must be loud to be real, that anger must be explosive to be justified. But there is another kind of power that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't raise its voice or demand attention. It moves deliberately, with clarity and intention, and that kind of strength is often underestimated until it has already changed the outcome. When someone chooses not to react immediately, it's rarely because they don't feel deeply. It's because they are listening. They are observing. They are allowing the full picture to emerge before deciding how to respond. That pause is not weakness. It is discipline. It takes courage to sit with pain without letting it dictate behavior. It takes control to resist the urge to lash out, especially when humiliation and heartbreak are involved. Quiet strength understands that emotional reactions, while valid, can also be predictable. Betrayers often expect anger, tears, accusations, and desperation. They prepare for those responses. They know how to deflect them, manipulate them, or use them as proof that the other person is irrational or unstable. When none of that comes, the dynamic shifts. Silence disrupts expectations. Calm removes leverage. Patience creates space for truth to surface without interference. Documentation is one of the most powerful tools of quiet strength. Instead of arguing over memories or intentions, facts are gathered. Messages are saved. Timelines are confirmed. Patterns are identified. This approach removes emotion from the equation without denying its presence. It allows reality to speak for itself. And when reality is allowed to stand on its own, it becomes difficult to dispute. The truth no longer depends on persuasion. It exists independently. There is also dignity in refusing to perform pain for an audience. Public outrage can feel satisfying in the moment, but it often comes at the cost of privacy and control. When emotions are broadcast immediately, they become vulnerable to misinterpretation and exploitation. Quiet strength protects the inner experience until it can be processed safely. It recognizes that healing is not a spectacle, and that not every feeling needs to be shared in real time. Choosing patience doesn't mean suppressing emotions. It means channeling them in a way that serves long-term well-being rather than short-term release. Anger can be turned into clarity. Grief can become resolve. Shock can sharpen focus. Quiet strength allows emotions to inform decisions instead of driving them. It acknowledges the pain while refusing to let it determine the direction forward. This approach also denies the betrayer the satisfaction of control. When someone reacts explosively, the betrayer remains central to the narrative. They are still the axis around which emotions revolve. Quiet strength recenters the story. It shifts attention away from the person who caused harm and toward the person who is choosing what happens next. That shift is subtle, but it is profound. Over time, quiet strength often leads to outcomes that loud reactions cannot achieve. It builds credibility. It earns respect. It allows others to see the situation clearly without distraction. When decisions are made from a place of calm, they tend to be more strategic and effective. Consequences unfold naturally, supported by evidence rather than fueled by emotion. This creates a form of accountability that is difficult to dismiss or escape. There is also an internal transformation that occurs. Responding with quiet strength reinforces self-trust. It proves that pain does not have to dismantle identity or values. It shows that dignity can coexist with vulnerability. This realization becomes a foundation for future boundaries and relationships. It changes how a person sees themselves in moments of crisis. Quiet strength doesn't seek validation. It doesn't need applause. Its reward is freedom from chaos and the ability to move forward without regret. While others may mistake it for passivity, its impact is undeniable. It leaves no room for manipulation, no opportunity for reversal, and no lingering doubt about what happened or why. In the end, it speaks louder than anger ever could, because it allows truth and consequences to unfold without interference. Walking away is often misunderstood as surrender, especially in a world that glorifies confrontation and dramatic closure. People are taught that revenge looks like retaliation, exposure, or watching someone else suffer in real time. But there is a quieter, more devastating kind of revenge that doesn't require conflict at all. It comes from choosing yourself, reclaiming your future, and refusing to carry the weight of someone else's choices any longer. When someone walks away with intention, they are not avoiding the truth. They are acknowledging it fully and deciding that it no longer deserves their energy. That decision can feel anticlimactic to outsiders who expect a showdown, but it is deeply empowering to the person making it. It signals the end of emotional negotiation. There is no more waiting for explanations, apologies, or accountability that may never come. Walking away closes the door without slamming it, and that silence can be more unsettling than any argument. The power of walking away lies in what it denies the other person. It removes access. It removes audience. It removes relevance. Many people who betray trust expect to remain central in the aftermath, either as the villain being confronted or the figure being begged to change. When that attention disappears, so does their influence. They are left alone with the consequences of their actions, without the distraction of managing someone else's pain. Walking away also reclaims time. Betrayal steals time twice. First, through the deception itself, and second, through the aftermath, when the injured party is consumed by processing, questioning, and reliving what happened. Choosing to move forward interrupts that cycle. It redirects focus toward rebuilding rather than rehashing. Every step taken away from the situation is a step toward something new, even if the path isn't immediately clear. There is a moment, often overlooked, when walking away shifts from being an act of survival to an act of self-respect. That moment arrives when the pain no longer defines the decision. Instead, values do. The choice becomes less about what happened and more about what will not be tolerated again. That clarity is transformative. It reshapes boundaries and informs future relationships in a way that anger alone cannot. True revenge is rarely loud. It doesn't announce itself or seek validation. It unfolds over time as the person who was wronged builds a life that no longer includes the source of harm. Success, peace, and emotional stability become the response rather than the goal. The absence of drama becomes the statement. And for the person left behind, that absence is often the hardest thing to accept. Walking away allows healing to happen without obstruction. Constant engagement with the past keeps wounds open. Distance gives them space to close. That distance can be physical, emotional, or both, but its effect is the same. It creates room for perspective. It allows the nervous system to settle. It makes it possible to imagine a future not shaped by betrayal. There is also a quiet confidence that grows when someone realizes they don't need closure from another person to move on. Closure becomes internal. It comes from understanding that some answers will never be given and some apologies will never be sincere. Accepting that truth without bitterness is a form of liberation. It places control back in the hands of the person who chooses to leave. Over time, walking away rewrites the narrative. What once felt like loss begins to feel like release. The energy that was spent trying to make sense of deception is redirected toward growth and possibility. New opportunities emerge not because of revenge, but because of availability. When emotional space is cleared, life has room to expand. The ultimate irony is that walking away often leads to the outcome people originally sought through confrontation. The person who caused harm is left to face the reality of their actions without distraction. Their image fades. Their influence diminishes. Meanwhile, the person who left builds something solid and self-directed. That contrast speaks volumes without saying a word. Walking away isn't about winning over someone else. It's about winning yourself back. It's the decision to stop bleeding for people who never valued your sacrifice. And in that choice, there is a strength that doesn't need to prove itself, because its results are visible in the life that follows.